Hi, I'm down with Tank Techs and Just Science, and I am in Apple Valley, California this morning, my hometown where I grew up from 1955 to 1977. And I'd like to tell you a story about how Tank Techs, and especially Tank Tech Septic, came about and why it's so important to me. And let me show you a picture of the town, and I'm on the hillside above Apple Valley, overlooking what we would call the greater Victor Valley area, and I'll show that to you. Hey, this is what we would call the greater Victor Valley area. This is kind of the desert knolls area of the day. That is the mountains that separate the high desert from San Bernardino and the Los Angeles basin. There where those clouds are sitting is Cajon Pass. And when we moved here in 1955 into this little quaint village, my dad was the manager of the Sears store in Victorville. It was a little catalog store back in those days. But there was maybe 10,000 people in this entire valley. And I got to watch it change growing up. And it was a lot of good changes and a lot of changes that, naturally I'd not prefer. But today there's probably 250,000 people in this valley, and it has made some profound environmental impacts that did not have to happen the way they happened. And I want to tell you that story because right now this area, which was a beautiful area, is dying because there's no water. And they could have saved a ton of water had they not made one decision they made. And I'll tell you about that. But first, let's go back to my first home here in Apple Valley, and we'll begin the story there. Okay, we're on what's known as Corwin Road, and it's kind of a main road here in this part of Apple Valley. Highway 18 and Yucca are two of the other big roads in this area that, if you're familiar with it, you'd know about. But this is the traditional 1 acre to half-acre properties that flooded this area back starting in the 40s when New Bass began to develop the area. And it's grown up considerably since then. But it was, in that day, cheap water, abundant water, because it was here. And the first place to call home outside of the metropolitan Los Angeles basin. If you follow that mountain line, which you probably can't see well on the video, but down to the right-hand side of the screen, those mountains end up basically over in the Palmdale, Lancaster area, the other route into the Los Angeles basin. But it was a great place to grow up, and we enjoyed it. But it is sad coming back here actually 66 years later to the day we moved in, and to see what is happening. And a lot of it is because there's no water. Now, back when we moved here, none of this was here. When I first came here in 1956 September, that house right there in the corner was there, and the rest of this was all raw desert. Now, originally these houses all had lawns, but this corner right here, this was my domain. As a 6-year-old, my mom was a country girl, and she had the attitude of boys belong outside doing whatever it is that boys do. And as long as they're home for dinner and before dark, she was okay with that. So this was pretty much my domain. And there was nothing up here to bother. That house I just showed you was there. This house right here was there. That's an original. When we sat there, Dad's house is right down there. And there was one other house over there, and one over there, and maybe 3 across that mountain, and that was it. Now, when we moved here, everything was on a septic system. And I learned about septic systems very, very young, because the first thing we had to do when this was all dirt was dig it up. My dad's job brought him here. He was a manager of Sears. We moved into that house in 1956. It was on almost free water. Dad put in a cactus garden out front, which he got the cactus from the hills up there. I'm not sure that was legal, but nobody cared back in 1956. And it was low impact. There was trees all over the place. There was a row of trees over here that were covered the whole shade area. They've all died because there's no water. The backyard was all grass, and that was my job to take care of it. We had a swimming pool right behind that little house right there, or that little garage right there, and it was great. Lots of yard work, low maintenance front yard, high maintenance backyard, roses like crazy. My mom had me trim the roses as a 12-year-old, and I went out and cut them back with one big stroke, and she thought I killed them all, and the gardener came in and said, no, you actually cut them back right. They came back beautiful. It was an oasis. It was a great place to be. Back in 1955, 56, and in the 60s, water was flowing free, life was good. But then somebody got the bright idea that we needed, because the houses were developing and they were putting more houses in, they needed a municipal sewer system. So sometime, I don't know, it must have been in the late 60s, they dug up all the roads and put in new water lines and a sewer system. And one man who was a personal friend of my dad's, his name was Marion Ely, he was the working for the county of San Bernardino. This is all San Bernardino County, and he was the geologist, and he opposed the sewer system because he said, we live in a desert. We need the water. Don't dump the water in a municipal system. The ground will take care of itself. Put it all back in the ground. Well, back then, there wasn't that many houses. Like there's over 100,000 houses today. And they were all on 1-acre lots. So the ground, being negatively charged, would take care of the bacteria, and in 11 feet, put the water back into the ground. He said, it's a perfect system, leave it alone. Well, powers that be disagreed, and they put in a municipal sewer system. The problem with that municipal sewer system has compounded over the last 66 years. But for me, my journey began right here on 2 occasions, digging up the septic tank to clean it. Had they had our product, or my dad had it at that time, we'd have never had to clean it up. It would have taken care of itself with the probiotics, but we didn't have that technology back then. And that's part of the reason they wanted to do it, I'm sure, is they didn't know how to take care of a septic tank. So the best thing for everybody was put in a sewer system and let it be somebody else's problem. But now somebody else's problem has become everybody's problem. There's no water. I left this paradise in 1967 to go to college on the other side of the hill in Los Angeles, about an hour and a half away. Came home on weekends, took care of everything. My parents at that point were both invalids, my father with a heart condition, my mom with a back condition. So I came home, and when I graduated from seminary, yes, I went to seminary and I have a doctorate, but I still make this product. I'll tell you that story in another video. But when I came back here, I started working in a church here, and I moved into a house on the other side of that mountain that had a septic system. Let's go over there and I'll tell you that story. Back when I was a kid and water was abundant, there were water features and lawns everywhere. Now it's artificial turf and stacks of rock. And a lot of the places that you see, the grass is so expensive that very few places have grass anymore. But back then, this was all open desert, and it was a child's paradise. Oh, for the good old days. When I was all the way through high school, if you came down this road, there was nothing here. This was all open. One of my favorite places to play as a child was that stack of rocks right there. because there was nothing else around, and it was the only stack of rocks on our side of the highway that I was allowed to go to. Spent a lot of time on those rocks. Now it's all behind a chain link fence. But you notice that everything out here, and this is a very nice area, but the trees are all dying, and everything has been converted to astroturf and dry and rock or sand landscaping. It's a necessity. It's the way it has to be on these beautiful houses, but you can't even afford to water the trees anymore, and it's sad to see they are drying out and dying. Everywhere I look, dying trees, because you can't afford to even water the trees. The water's just not there. You notice pine trees take a lot more water than I realized, and most of the pine trees, unless they're specifically watering them, are dying. But I wanted to stop right here to show you the only real grass that they have left in this area. And this is the golf course in Apple Valley. Nice course, but we won't walk over there right now. But down in that little depression by those trees was how I made my money as a kid. I would, there's a little pond over there, just on the other side of that dead tree. And in that little pond, golfers would stick golf balls. And I would wade out there in about thigh-deep water for an 8-year-old, wasn't deep, and pick the golf balls up out of the mud, and they'd give me a quarter. And I'd sit there all day Saturday. And rural town, small town, they let you do that back in those days. And they thought it was fun to have the ball boy. And I would go through the pond and pick up all the other balls and sell them back to the golfers for 25, 35 cents. But in that day, that was 5 candy bars or 5 packs of gum or a gallon of gas if I'd have been old enough to drive. It's all relative, but it was fun. But the only place that has green grass anymore of any size is the golf course and the local park. Very few of the residents have it. We're here at the corner of Highway 18 and Rancho Rios. My buddy Butch used to own the Arco station right there. And believe it or not, that was, back in the day, the airport that has now moved to the other end of the valley. But it was a very rural area, wide open, and now it's all housing and apartments. Tremendous demand on the limited resources. But we're on the back side of the mountain that we started on earlier in the video. Favorite hunt, I probably climbed that top of that mountain 100 times, because it's the biggest mountain in the area and a fun place to be. We were over in the Desert Knolls area, and now we're in the we'll call this Central Apple Valley area. And you'll notice the houses are not quite as big. It's a more modest area, nice, but you'll notice how the landscaping changes, because it is so expensive to keep anything green in this area anymore. Some of the older trees are still hanging in there, deep roots, but most of it is being converted to dirt. There is one of the few rare lawns, and that's an apartment complex, so an individual isn't paying for that. A lot of the older houses in this area have been removed and new ones have been put in, but landscaping is a luxury. Okay, we're traveling down Dale Evans Parkway. It wasn't Dale Evans Parkway back in '77 when I left, but I knew Roy and Dale. I worked for them at the Apple Valley Inn for a while, went to school with their kids, had some of their kids in my youth group when I was pastoring here, and great people. And I'm glad they remember her, because she was a phenomenal woman. But these houses in here are a mix of some of the stuff that's maybe back into the 70s and 80s. Had friends that lived along here. Lawns are all gone, trees are gone, but I passed 2 schools. There's another school coming up on our right. When I grew up here, there was 1 school in Apple Valley, 1 school in Victorville for grade schools, and there was 1 high school for the whole area. Now there's 8 high schools in this area. Some of them are only 3 miles apart. So it's grown tremendously. But I do notice, and I do approve of this, and I hope that they can continue it, because the schools here still and the parks are about the only places you can find grass. But what happens when there's not enough water to water the grass? Everything goes to artificial turf. They're doing that in Phoenix, where some of the schools are getting rid of their infield grass and playing on artificial turf. That's just a reality when you're running out of water. But if you'll notice this over here, that's pretty much what everything looked like back in the day when I lived here. It was all just open desert. 60 years ago, this was my wife and her family's house. Had a beautiful front lawn. It was an adorable place. Had big trees on the front. My dad and my father-in-law planted those pine trees that are on the left-hand side there. They planted them all the way around this half-acre property. And when the price of water got so high, they had to quit, and you know, we sold the place 25 years ago now. But I come back here and I look and say, wait a second, why is that set of pine trees still there and the other set of pine trees that was ringing the property gone? The answer is simple. Right straight behind there, although the house itself is on the city water district and the city sewer system, the washing machine leach line goes right down off those trees. And that is and they're obviously still using that leach line, and that's why those trees are there. That water didn't go into the city sewer. Now, if all the houses around here had been able to keep that gray water, and they coded for that, could you see what this could look like without losing any water if they just use their gray water? That's an example of what maintaining your own water can do. Those trees are alive because they're fed by the washing machine. I was out of the valley for 9 years, and I moved down to this area of the valley, which was at that time the outskirts, the only place I could afford. And it is actually was affordable because it's a mud flat. You'll notice the houses are built up on pads here because this is basically a dry lake bed. And when I moved here, none of these houses were here. There was only 3 of them out here. And I want to show you something specifically about this house, because it was a great place for a first house for a family. But when I came here, that's the house that I moved into in 1977. There was a water tower down here, and it was a private place. It was all trees. I bought it from a friend. But water in this area was really expensive because it was a private water company just for this flat area out here, and there was nothing out here. It was paradise for me. My friends from the city would come up and they'd start in that road right there. They'd come across here, they'd jump their sand rails off that dirt, fly out into that desert, and go out into the flats. And this whole area, it's still not built in because it goes underwater if it ever rained. And none of that you can see out there. The airport's out there and FedEx is out there. A lot of building out there now. But that used to be farms. And for me, it was everything that I wanted when I got out of the city. But this place was covered in trees. And the guy said, water's not bad. And the water meter is right there. You can see it. And when I first moved here, I came out to check the water meter. And the water meter spinner fell off. And I realized his water is so cheap because he takes the water meter off every month before the meter reader comes around and spins it back. So I put in a well, and there is the well casing right there. We struck water we had water at 189 feet. Now, I know that well isn't working anymore. It's been capped off, and because I know what it's supposed to look like. There's no electric or anything going into it. So this well is no longer in use, and I know why. Because there is no water here. The water table has dropped that much. These trees that were so gorgeous are all drying up and dying. But to put the well in, realize none of these other houses were out here. I had to move the septic system in the back. They moved the leach field back. So we dug a new leach field. So in my early days, I became very familiar with septic systems and leach fields. And that particular leach field was a pit 40 feet deep, 5 foot wide, and lined. And it only had to be from here to the back of the property. This is a half-acre property for clearance to purify the water. So there is enough room on here for everybody to have their own water and their own septic system without contaminating the water, because it will purify in that kind of distance by a long shot. Statistically, it's 11 feet and it's pure. But we had to watch that, and I learned that the septic systems are good, and I felt good about it, because back then there was still plenty of water, and we hadn't seen the impact of the municipal water systems taking all the water out. Great place to live, but now it's still a great place. It'd be even better if they had water. That was once, when I lived here, a beautiful Kentucky bluegrass lawn. Now they can't get the water to feed it, nor should they. Water's getting too scarce here in Southern California. The municipal well that fed this, I guess it was a private well, but there was a big storage tank sat right here, and the wellhead was right here, and it fed this housing tract. Back then it was maybe 30 houses, and kept us supplied in water. It was expensive, but we had water. It went out frequently because there was holes in the tank. But I show you this to tell you that if there was still water here, and this is the lowest spot in Apple Valley, you're sitting in the middle of a dry lake, and you see of all the areas around it that it's been developed, this has not been developed because it's a dry lake bed. And theoretically, if it rained, it would go underwater, which it did when I was living here, and it was a ball with a sand rail. But it hasn't in probably 25 or 30 years. Partially the drought. You see over there, probably doesn't show up on camera, but it's been turned into the solar panels. There's probably 10 acres of solar panels there feeding the electric grid, which is a good use for a dry lake bed, because nothing else could be put out here. But once again, back to our story of no water, and they took the water away. Let me show you where they put the water. I wanted to show you what they did with all the water they took out of this valley. Pictures can't do it justice. The mountain that we're coming into right now is kind of divides Apple Valley in half. Half of it's on this side of the mountain that goes all the way out to the Lucerne Valley, and the other half's on the other side of the mountain, which is where we started on this video this morning. And now, when we started in 55, there was maybe 4,000 people, as I recall the sign, in 1956. Today, there's easily over 100,000 people. So that conservative estimate is 25 or 30,000 houses out here that have been built over the last 66 years. But you can see, if I pan that way, that's that whole valley out there, and it's all houses, and all of this was put on the municipal water system and all sent to one spot, which in theory wouldn't have been a bad idea if they had a way of reusing it like they do in, say, Henderson, Nevada, or in Las Vegas. Their water goes out to Lake Mead, and they get credit for all the water that goes through the septic system to pump back out of Lake Mead into Las Vegas. And so, and they're in water trouble too. You know the problems of Lake Mead. But at least they had a way to try to recapture some. And we're coming over the hill. We're back on Corwin Road, and that's the Victorville going up into the mountains. And the majority of that water, I'm told, goes into the same municipal system, because you can see the water's going to flow down from Apple Valley into this gully, and it's going to go into or towards the Mojave River. So it was a natural grade towards the Mojave River, and we'll get to a better spot, and I'll show you that, tell you a little bit about the Mojave River. Okay, probably not This is a truck entrance for the old bridge. But back when I was a kid, those railroad tracks, you can barely see over there, were there. And this is the mighty Mojave. Let's go over to the other side and see this mighty flow of water. On this side there's a pool. There used to be rope swings under it. But what's so important about the Mojave River? It's the only one. It's the only one of the few in the world that flow north. But in all of Southern California, name me another river that is actually flowing. This one doesn't actually flow much anymore. Back in the day, say the 20s or 30s, this river was running bank to bank. A couple times when I lived here, the water almost got up to the railroad tracks, maybe halfway. But back in the 20s and 30s, the old pictures that are taken from this vantage point show water during the normal course would be flowing from those trees over there to these trees over here. But now it's reduced to, that water's not moving, it's just low spot. And the reason the water's right here is because the Narrows, that's what this is called, is a rock structure that forces the underground water above ground. But in the 66 years that I've watched this river, I've seen this whole thing plowed. So to save the water, I've seen it in the 90s. It was a series of beaver ponds from here to Oro Grande, probably 100 different beaver ponds. It was wonderful. A storm came through and wiped out the beaver ponds. The population grew and the river never came back. But folks, this is the only river in Southern California. The next one that flows is the Colorado River. That's it. LA Basin has no rivers. Matter of fact, we have no natural lakes. All of the lakes down here that I'm aware of are man-made. Big Bear, Arrowhead, Spring Valley, Silverwood, and all the LA Pudding Stone, all the lakes and recreational spots in Southern California are man-made lakes because there are no natural lakes. Folks, the Southwest doesn't have all that much water. It rained back in the 20s. This was all cattle country. It was all grass. But when that rain stopped 60, 70 years ago, this is all that's left. Obviously, I'm doing this video myself, but off in the distance, there is a cement plant, another one. This is, I understand, a talc plant for talcum powder. Down there is a cement plant where they make cement. That's what we have here. They get it out of the mountains around. But we're going to follow that down that direction to the other side of the cement plant to see where all the water went. And I'll tell you about how much water is going out there every day. Continue on with our water story. We just come from Silverwood. We talked about that. And the water they put in to save the area. But this is the Mojave River, the mountains down there. If you can make them out, about 2 miles down is the Mojave Narrows, and about halfway between here and there, down off the point of those houses, there was a road, a dirt road that stopped on the Apple Valley side. And this, as far as you can see, when I was growing up into the 70s as an adult here, none of this was here. This was just an open riverbed, and I would disappear and my country mom didn't care. I'd take off on my horse in the morning and I'd be down here, and this was where the river began. It came out of the ground right here at Yuckaloma Road, and I'd be about half mile down and the river was flowing, and then it was flowing enough at that point, so much water came out of the ground. To the left, it went into Kemper Campbell Ranch, and there was a series of beaver ponds from the 1950s going in there. And Kemper Campbell Ranch had a water ski lake. It was kind of a 1 mile oval, and 3 or 4 other lakes. They eventually sold it to the state when I was in high school, and so it was state land, and nobody went in there. I did, and I could catch a bass or a catfish on every cast. There was ducks galore in there. I used to take my surfboard in and just had a wonderful time, and all year round. But the water would come out of the ground in here, and I'd show up here, well, maybe a quarter mile down where the road used to be. And all you had to do is look up the river in the winter, and you could see where the water was coming out of the ground from the steam, because it'd be, in the high 20s, low 30s at that time. And you knew that if you were a duck hunter, all you had to do is walk to where the steam was, because that's where all the ducks were sitting. So much water was coming out of the ground. It flowed from here all the way to the other side of Oro Grande nonstop, which it obviously doesn't anymore. We were hoping that Silverwood would have solved that problem. It didn't. Even as early as the 90s, this was a series of beaver ponds that it was just an incredible area. But then the housing boom and the growth and siphoning off what now is 8 billion gallons of water a year that could have been recycled through the septic systems here is gone, and we're left with a dry riverbed. The only time it sees water now is if there's a major flash flood. And then it soaks right in. So this was a wonderful playground for a child in the 60s, 70s, probably up into the 80s and 90s. But the demand and the drought has turned it into a place for four-wheelers to play in the sand. The water's gone. Kemper Campbell Ranch still has the trout farms and stuff over there. The trout farm upstream from here that was a state trout farm is gone, been gone for years. The junior college is up there now on that property. But it was a great place that is now probably never going to be the same again. And it's not because of the people. The people are welcome. It's because we didn't protect the water right. We didn't treat it well. We could have done better. Would all these houses be on septic? Would that have helped? Yes, it would have saved right now 8 billion gallons a year. That's a lot of water. Would it have solved the problem? No. We've got to do more. And if the drought continues, we're going to have to do more. My hope and prayer is that we go back to a 1920s rainy cycle. I don't know if that'll happen, but this is a wonderful place. But like every other place in the Southwest, if you don't have water, it doesn't stand a chance. We've got to protect our water now, where we can, with whatever technology we have, and pray that we develop better technology, because the people and the housing are going to be here. Okay, we're paralleling the Mojave River, so a couple hundred yards to our right, and we're heading out towards what used to be George Air Force Base. It was a training base for the military. It was the backbone of the economy of this town of the 50s and 60s. It has since been mothballed, and I think it's a freight base now. But all of Victor Valley, from the mountains up there in Cajon Pass out to Lucerne Valley, all drain, if it ever rained, into this spot down to this river, the Mojave. And here's the other mainstay of the old days, the cement plant. Just about everybody that was here in the 50s and 60s had somebody that worked at one of our couple cement plants or at Jess's Turkey Ranch. But it's a pretty dry area in here. There is no building going on out in this section of town. I don't have any idea why, but once you get around this corner out here, we're tracing where did all the water go. Now, admittedly, I'm going from old memory and what I was told. I don't know this to be a fact, but it makes sense. And I checked it out with the locals before I came in here, that the water was, the pipes were all put over here somewhere in the Mojave Riverbed for the sanitation and sewer pipes. And they all end up down here, which is, I haven't been here for over 50 years. And So I've never been out to this part, and no reason to come out here, but I'm curious to see what did they do with all that water. And we're going to go see if we can find it. I was told if I go to George Air Force Base Road and turn right towards the river, I'll find it. So hopefully that's true, and I'll look for the signs. Your regional seepage area, there was a sign. But I couldn't tell very quickly which way it went. So I'm going to go out this way a little bit because I know what's up to the left. That goes up to George Air Force Base away from the river. So the seepage area is out here someplace. So we'll just go down here a couple miles and see if there's a road to it. But as you can see, we just lost civilization. Got the railroad tracks, and those pipes for the pumps would have had to come through this area because it's the only place to put it. So we'll see what happens. For those of you who know the area, where George Air Force Base and the towers are about a mile to our left. And there's their water tanks and stuff up there. Mojave River is now on our left-hand side. And it's kind of fun. There was a high school friend's grandson is running for mayor of the town, big side. Kind of an interesting nostalgia trip, but wherever they put that seepage plant, I don't see it, but there is no water in the river down here. And we're maybe 4 miles line of sight from where we were, and there's another bunch of solar panels sticking up out here. So, and another cement plant coming up, but no sign where the water went. And there's, you know, I'm familiar with water treatment plants, and I am wondering, I don't know what that is, what those big domes are. That could be a cement plant, could be a water treatment plant. I just don't know. I guess we'll find out when we get down there. But you can see this area, and this is right off the old river. It's dry. And the river is right over there. And the fields that were in here they're dried up. They're not harvesting anything out of them anymore. It's kind of a blighted area in what once, back in the day, was all farmland. But if you don't have any, okay, we're out into Oro Grande right now, and so that's the Oro Grande cement plants. And there was a sign for the seepage plant, but back there, wherever they put it along here, it is not remarkable. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking for that because it's just a water treatment plant, and the water, I know, goes into the ground and it goes into the Mojave River someplace to our left, but there's not any big ponds or anything as you would expect to find. This is downtown Oro Grande. Back in the day, it was a fun place. We all came out in this general area to play baseball in the church leagues and stuff. Fun place, but it's drying up now. And those were the days. All these fields that were alfalfa fields, they're gone. No water. It's really sad to see. It didn't have to quite be that way. I know the drought is taking a severe effect, but there's other mitigating circumstances. We could have made wiser decisions if we'd have known about it then. And my point is, let's make wiser decisions now in how we treat it, and stop doing things that are kind of foolish to do. So, since we can't locate exactly where that treatment plant is. And I know some of my friends are going to post on here, you missed it, it was here, there, because it's along here someplace, although I haven't got a clue as to what it looks like. Okay, and there it is on the other side over there. All right, well, that's good, I found it. I just can't get to it, and I'm not taking my car where it is. But all right, over there is, I believe that's the water treatment plant where they described it should be, and that's on the backside of George Air Force Base, and that does look like a water treatment plant over there. But what they did when they pumped it out, and this is just a mathematical equation to tell you what happened to all the water. And I'm just going to sit here on the old, not the airbase road, but the road to Oregon Rand. And this is all dry in here. This was all alfalfa fields and farms. But the water treatment plant is right there. And by pulling the water out of the valley, there was 6,000 to 10,000 people there. Now there are at least 250,000 people in that same area. At 2.6 people per family, that leaves 100,000 houses and apartments that are using water. At 100,000 houses, according to Google, the average amount of water that a family will use in a day is 300 gallons, 70% of which is used inside the house. Simple math tells you that 21 million gallons a day of water are going through that plant and being pumped into that river. Now, where does this river go? This river goes to Barstow and Yermo, and then just empties into the desert. Out in Newberry Springs, in my day, was one of the first water parks back in the 60s. It was a fabulous place. It was so much fun. It was absolutely insane and dangerous, but it was fun. The farmer that built it couldn't grow alfalfa because the water was too the soil was too alkaline, and the water table was only 4 foot deep. So he made giant pools with slides and trapezes and everything, and it was a wonderful place. I don't know if that water's out there anymore. I do know that the Mojave River is the only river that flows north in consistently, and it empties out on the other side of Barstow into the desert and goes nowhere. And it's the only river we have in Southern California. And all that 21 million gallons a day is being pumped into that river. And Barstow, Yermo, that area is not really developing. I don't know what happened to that water or where they're using it, but it could have been recycled and put back here, or it could have been left alone in the septic systems had they the technology that we now have. Because with our probiotics that we put in a septic tank, you can turn that water, get rid of the sludge, which is why they put it in, because nobody can handle the sludge, and septic tanks are maintenance. But we'll tell you about that a little bit later. But we have the technology today where you have the acre, half acre houses, you can take care of the water and not contaminate with pathogens the groundwater. Now, I understand in Nevada that they have so many houses, they've got 20,000 septic tanks in a small area, and the groundwater is being contaminated because of the nitrogens. Well, guess what? Probiotics will take care of that, balance the systems in everybody's backyard, and they have shut off the water supplies in those areas because the groundwater is contaminated because of the multitude of septic systems that are installed in every house. That problem can be fixed, and that ground can be cleaned up normally just by treating those tanks. And it's not expensive, and it's not hard to do, and it flat out works. I've tested it for 16 years. We can do this. We can do better than we've done in the past because we know more now than we knew then. We know how to create healthy probiotic bacteria that will cooperate, clean the water, let the ground do the rest, and restore those areas that have overloads of septic systems in there. It can be done. But what are we doing here in Southern California to solve the problem? I want to show you that because the solution was, let's bring in water from Northern California through, I think it was called the Feather River Project, and then also from the Colorado River, and take care of this metropolitan area. And on our side of the mountain, it was Silverwood Lake. So we're going to head up to Silverwood Lake, and I'll tell you the story of Silverwood Lake and what it was supposed to do and what they hoped it would do and what it did do. It's a beautiful lake. You're going to love it. Here's a little bit better view of the main body of the lake. Now, this is a Monday, September 19th. So there's not a lot of activity on the lake, but the lake is fairly high right now. And all this water came from Northern California because it didn't rain here enough to fill this lake up. But the lake goes back up and up into those mountains, back up into there. It has a lot of dog legs around it. Not tremendously large, but it was an easy place to put a lake because they only had to dam off that one part of the valley right there. And it's, I don't know, 70, 80 feet over there. That rock pile was a great place for catching the big trout back in the mid 70s. But this is the water resource that we have. There's another one like it down in Paris, another one up in Castaic in the LA basin. But without this water, all this ends up getting shipped into somebody's homes someplace in Southern California. It was wise for them to make it. I'll bet you they wish now they'd have made it bigger because there's a lot more water up north. And I know there's all kinds of political agendas that go on in that. But I'm just talking about from the human standpoint, we need more water. We need to protect it. And this is a great way to have it because people come in, they boat into here, they hike into here. It's a great recreation, and with a couple hundred, or 20 or 30 million people that could get to this lake, it's worth having it here. But like everything else, it needs to be protected too. And I hope that they're making, and I know they're making every effort that they know to do that. Okay, my plan. When I left here in 1977, I had sold my Honda Scrambler 250, and I never got to come this far up the road. Now this is the back road to Arrowhead and Crestline, and you recall, I took this road on my honeymoon, but not the way I would have liked to take it. I always wanted to drive this road on a motorcycle that was built for country speed and country roads. Well, it took me about 35 years, but I came back a little smarter, a lot smarter, with a lot bigger bike. And my brother-in-law and I loaded up our motorcycles, and we brought our wives. We were married to sisters, and brought her up to Apple Valley and let our wives be with their sister. My wife is not a fan of motorcycles. She does not like these roads, and she wouldn't get on one. But I told my brother-in-law, if we take them to see their sister, we can go do anything we want to. And so, I'm not on a motorcycle, Don. That's a 20-mile-an-hour corner. But can you see how much fun this would be on a motorcycle? Well, they said, go ahead. And we brought our bikes up here. I had gone from a Honda 250 to a Honda CB 1000 crotch rocket. And boy, was it fast. And you could lay through these corners at country speeds. I didn't push it beyond my ability. My brother-in-law had a vintage Honda, I don't remember what the engine size was, but it was a more classic look-alike for a Harley. And he couldn't lean over without dragging his pipes. And I was overheating coming up here, and I just said, Dave, gotta go, bud, because I'm overheating and I just laid into these corners. If you're a bike rider, you know exactly what I'm talking about right here. Coming down empty roads, it was just a ball, and I loved it. And we got to do that once, and I rode the roads. I got home safely, rode a little bit in Phoenix, and sold the bike. Because the law of riding a bike in Arizona is if you've ridden it for 2 years and you haven't had a wreck, you're overdue. So while I drive this road just for memory's sake, I hope you don't get dizzy watching it, but I love it. You might be wondering, why am I telling you these stories when I'm talking about the water conservation and all these things? Well, I want you to know who I am as a person. I want you to see through my eyes why I do what I do. Now, I accidentally discovered the probiotics for the septic tank, which I'll show you that story later, because I have to go back to Phoenix to show you the finale of this. But I've always known of the problems of the water. I see it, but I don't expect you to take my word for anything, because we live in corporate America and I'm dealing with corporate America. And to be quite honest with you, they don't want my product because they said it's too good. It works too well, and I'm a certified septic inspector, and the septic inspecting schools don't want it to work because whole businesses are built around pumping septic tanks. I have found a way to eliminate or greatly reduce that with all natural probiotics. And why am I sharing you these stories with you? I want you to get a feel for who I am. I'm 73 years old. I don't have to do this. I could sell out and live comfortably the rest of my life. But I have learned so much with what we can do with probiotics and through Just Science with the tools that we're making and what's coming online and what we can do. I'm not ready to quit. I want to share it with you. And that's my real motivation. This is fun for me. I'm on vacation and I'm making a very poor quality video just driving up this road, but I wanted you to get the idea that you're not dealing with a corporation, you're dealing with an individual, me. My name's Don Zimmerman. I've been a pastor for 50 years. I gave my church away finally after 25 years of working towards it, and it was one of the happiest days of my life. And now I'm doing this. I'm bringing this to you because I know it works, and all the other stuff that I've got, I know it works. And I'm sharing this with you in hopes that you'll give me a chance to trust me. Say, you know, he just might be telling me the truth. It's not about the money. It's about I have something to share with you that can be used in so many areas that protect and save and preserve this planet, our pets, our property. You wouldn't believe the number of things that I'm going to be bringing to you. And I want you to give me a chance. I want you to know who I am, what I've done, and I've shared stuff on this that I never shared with my dad. But I want you to know I'm just a regular guy that found something that flat out works, and I want to share it with you. And if you think that even might be true, I hope you'll share this video with others, or like it, or subscribe, because we're going up against the biggest companies, and I'm going to show you in other videos what's really going on behind the scenes and what some of these products do, because we test them all. And unfortunately, I can't tell you everything I know because the law won't allow me to, or my attorney won't. But I'll tell you as much as I can so that you can have as much confidence and check it out and see that I'm telling you the truth. So that's why I'm doing it. And we're going to stop this part of the drive. I'm going to enjoy it by myself just because I love it. And we'll pick up again in Phoenix, Arizona, where I discovered and how I discovered it and what it does. And you can see what I discovered in 2006 and see the results of it today, all these years later, in a protected septic system. that was clogged. We'll see you again in Phoenix. All right, we're back in Arizona. We finished our California tour on where all the water went. I wanted to show you my tank and come back to the very beginning. Had septic tanks almost all my life. Pretty familiar with them. This tank plugged in 2006. Now it's on a leach field. We're on bedrock up here, and the leach field was overflowing, and the water was 42 inches down to the top, and I measured it at 42 inches down. Now this is a deep tank here. It's actually deeper than it should be, but I went down 42 inches here. The water level should be at 57, so I'm going to push it down and see what the water level is right now at 57, and we measure right off that side right there, 47, 57. Okay, that's the bottom of the tank. Now I'm going to bring this back up, and we just got into a 1/4 inch of water. So we're still at 57 inches. That's exactly where the 3-inch pipe that goes into the drain field is. That's where it has stayed since 2007. So now what I want to know is how much sludge is in my tank, because this tank has not been pumped since 2007. And there's been 4 to 10 people living here constantly. There's 2 houses on this one septic tank, 2 washer and dryers, 2 everything. So I have a sludge judge. I am a certified septic inspector. Now I know that on the bottom of this hole, we had a rainstorm and it washed sand in it. So I know I got a little sand on the bottom that will do this, but a good septic tank shouldn't be more than 3 foot below the surface. This one is, well, let me show you. This is an 8-foot pipe, okay, and watch how far down it has to go. Okay, I'm going to shove it down there, and I got to get onto my knees. There is no air down there where my leach field is like they're supposed to be. So now I'm down here, oops, sorry, as far as I can go, and right there is the bottom. So I'm going to pull that cap up, and I'm going to seal it. And it doesn't hold water perfectly, but it's going to trap some water in that pipe, and we'll see what we got in the way of sludge. I did not feel any sludge going in, nor did I see it on the top. So let's see what we got going in that tank. All right. See that? Film that water. That's clear water in that tank. I've had people tell me that's impossible, but that's what it's been for several years now. And there's just, you can see in the bottom right there, that's where I captured some of that sand that's in the bottom of the tank. But there's no sludge, top or bottom.